Game over, man. Game over.
Johnny. You're gonna need a bigger boat. So serious. Roll out.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 558 for October 30th, 2023. And I'm JD Duran. Happy Halloween, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great time going out and scaring people to death and handing out candy to children. I assume that's what I'm doing. My son has decided. First of all, I guess before I get into that, let me introduce Dave Giannini. He's back once again. Brendan is gone. We've kicked him out of here.
That's right.
And Dave has moved in.
I love how I rank not only above Brendan, but above your own child. You were like starting to talk about your child. You're like, wait a minute. Forget that kid. We
gotta bring in Dave. Yeah, like I don't want you just sitting there awkwardly saying nothing as I get into a story, and who knows how long that takes. So
yes, I appreciate that. Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I guess like Brendan is on some trip. Some honeymoon.
Just,
you can't like depend on that guy for anything. It's like, I got married. Now I got to leave
off to
town.
Aruba. Yeah.
Jeez, poor guy.
In October. Yeah. Who celebrates Halloween in Aruba?
Only Brendan Cassidy. That's it.
Yeah, no, we do hope he's having a great time on his honeymoon.
For
so
sure.
I'm glad to have you back, Dave. And yes, as this episode goes live, it will be on Halloween. So I hope everyone is having a great time. My son, I mentioned this on social media if anyone follows, but my son has decided this year, after years of going on Halloween as, astronaut or an army guy, things that you typically expect of young children. No, this year he's going as Ghostface.
Nice.
That's the costume that he decided to go with. And guess how many times he has seen the Scream movies?
I'm going to go with 0.
0. 0 times. But he's seen some of the marketing, I think, because, he's on YouTube as every young kid is these days.
Sure.
And so I think he's seen some trailers and some marketing when the film came out earlier this year. And for whatever reason, he's like, that's what I'm going as, for Halloween. So
no joke though. This is a super important moment. Like there's that process of change when you're like, you go from like, I'm going to dress as thing I like, right? Like when I was a kid, I think I one Halloween, I dressed up, I had a Joe Montana jersey, which is not a scary thing at all, right? It's just a thing that you like. And then all of a sudden you get to a certain age or a certain maturity level and you're like, no, this is about scary stuff. Yeah. I have to really hit the theme hard now. So he's starting to figure it out. That's
absolutely.
Good. I love it.
There's something about seeing Ghostface through the lens of an innocent child, someone that is 4'3", that just makes that costume more harrowing.
Yeah, it just means they can sneak up on you. No, absolutely.
Exactly.
Did you give him like a little retractable knife, or are you going like no weapons?
He does. It comes with a knife, and it has a blood pouch as well.
Oh no.
We'll see about the blood pouch. I don't know if I want to come home with a giant mess.
Yeah. Oh, good Lord. You and your poor wife. Like, okay, I'm glad you had a good time, kid, but good God.
Yeah, so we might skip that part, but it does have that if we do decide to go for it. But it's exciting. It's a new leaf for him, and
for sure,
I am excited as we do make that change. But yeah, we hope that everyone is having a great Halloween. This week's show is going to be interesting. We have a few fun topics that we're going to get into here up at the top of the show. However,
I'm just glad you didn't go like, this week's show is going to be terrible. It's just going to be boring. Don't listen to it. Like, yes, it's going to be great.
Imagine, look, I would appreciate that level of transparency.
If I was listening to a podcast, they're like, this one, not great. So if you've got other things to do,
look, if you want to skip it, it's fine. Yeah. No, we try to bring something of value to the conversation here, and I'm very interested to get into these topics. However, this weekend, I can't remember if this is a wide or a limited release, but still hitting theaters in some capacity is Sofia Coppola's new film, Priscilla.
Do wide releases even exist anymore? What does that mean?
I don't even know.
I don't...
It's hard to tell.
But I will say it is coming to Lexington, Kentucky. So I feel like anything that comes to Lexington, that's a wide release. We made it.
Absolutely. And that is foreshadowing for a topic that we're going to get into here in a little bit. And I'm in Miami, which is a little bit of this weird gray area because
that's definitely a middle ground.
It's a middle ground. Yeah, it's not L.A., New York, or Chicago, but it's
or
also
Austin.
not
Just
Lexington or middle of nowhere America. So
it's so true. Like it's I think it's like New York, L.A., Chicago, Austin, Texas. Those are the
those are the
hot
hotbeds.
spots. Yeah,
absolutely. So, we don't get things super early like those major markets, but, we get these at a decent time, I would say. Most of the time anyway.
Yeah, you just got to deal with, whatever iguanas are falling out of trees.
Yeah, especially this time of year as we get to November and December and it starts to cool down. And by that, I mean it gets to 50 degrees. Oh, my. People here will be in parkas at 50 degrees, let me tell you.
Weak.
I know. It's soft. People that live here, and I say this with all the love in my heart, soft.
Yes. I mean, I'm from California, originally, I know soft. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's 62 degrees. It's freezing. And I'm like, guys, you're giving us all a bad name. Please stop.
Yeah, I know we got to thicken the skins up a little bit here.
Exactly. Agreed.
Yeah, no, it's still shorts weather for me until it gets to be 32 degrees and we can have a conversation. But it's very rare that we even come close to that here.
Totally.
However, all that to say, we will get to Priscilla in the back half of the show. Specifically, we're going to talk about Sofia Coppola and have a similar conversation with her as Dave and I did with Martin Scorsese a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited to get into that. However, to begin, Dave, we must circle back to the aforementioned episode 556, the last time that you were here with me. And we talked about A24, everyone's favorite studio.
The sellouts, A24, no longer indie, might as well be Warner Brothers. Just
yeah, so they announced they were going to the world of IP because, as we talked about, movies cost money.
Sad but true.
And it was a fun conversation. I really did enjoy that. And today there was a fun announcement, not with A24, but with Neon, who is, I guess, stealing the whole idea from A24 because they announced that there's going to be a sequel to the 2014 horror film It Follows, simply called They Follow.
They Follow.
Ooh.
I love it. It feels like someone on film Twitter. I have to be totally real with you, JD. I thought it was a joke. When I first...
Doesn't it feel like that?
It's like, too fast to follow. It's very... really, today we're just... Okay, there's more of a...
step from that, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even like you're pluralizing it. It could be anything, and they could be any number of things, I guess. Yeah, I definitely thought this was not for real. But yeah, master of IP, Neon, really going for the big bucks here.
Yeah, exactly. Brendan and I, we just reviewed Anatomy of a Fall, another Neon release, and he mentioned something to the effect that Neon has scooped up the last 3 Palme d'Or winners. I'm thinking there's a universe there, right? The Palme d'Or cinematic universe.
God, JD, I
we can
swear
build
to God,
up the Avengers of Neon.
I will leave. I will hang up this call.
I mean, we're right there.
Look, nothing would surprise me at this point. I mean, we've got Joe Russo trying to pick another fight with Martin Scorsese online. I mean,
so dumb.
That guy stinks.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. But yeah, It Follows from 2014. So here are a few numbers for context. The film was made on a budget, and offline Dave guessed $2 million, and he was not far off. The budget was $1.3 million for It Follows. The box office worldwide, $22 million. Pretty good.
It's pretty good. That's it's hard to beat. I mean, when you're making 20 times your budget, you're doing pretty good.
Doing pretty good. And if memory serves, there wasn't much marketing, if any, at all. So
yeah, it was kind of a beautiful word of mouth thing. Yeah, where it's like I remember hearing from friends like, "Oh, you got to check this out." And then you had to kind of seek it out and find it. And you know, of course, as anything with word of mouth, you're gonna get high expectations eventually, and I think sometimes that leads to people being like, "Wow, that wasn't that scary," and they get all kind of butthurt about it. But I think luckily I saw it early enough in that process that I was just like completely blown away by it. I don't know how I feel about this sequel, but I mean, I'm glad it's the same director, writer, same star. That's good. Yeah. Micah Monroe is in it again, who I love. I think she's phenomenal. She made the terrible choice of being in the Independence Day sequel, which was supposed to be like her big movie that did really well, and it's like, ooh, not so much. But she's kind of gone back to the indie stuff, so I'm tentatively excited about this. Like, I'm like excited in theory, but I know this could go very wrong very quickly.
Yeah, I'm excited for this as well. And it's interesting that it's this film because a few weeks ago, Jacob Thornberry was here on the show, and we were talking about horror films, and this film came up as one of my favorite films, I'd say, since doing InSession Film, at least horror films specifically.
Yeah.
I really liked it a lot, and I think what's interesting about that film, you can certainly parse out its themes and talk about its, genre components. But I think one of the more fascinating talking points is how you would handle yourself in that situation, because it's going to, like, that level of stakes is going to test your moral fortitude.
For sure.
Especially when it comes to survival, and given how you're able to get out of that situation, it's fascinating to talk about how you would respond in this situation. And of course, the film only goes down one of those avenues. I do think the material, simply in that regard, I think there really is a lot to still mine out of the idea.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
In terms of how anyone would respond to it. So I guess in a weird way, it does lend itself well to a sequel. And I can see why, going back to the conversation we did with A24, it's no surprise that Neon is really in that same boat.
Yeah.
Where, hey, we want to make some money.
Yeah. Anything with name recognition. So, JD, since this is, as a callback to our last episode, so this is one of your favorite movies that you've covered, would you consider this elevated horror? Is that
well? Let me tell you about that. I would say it's good horror.
Okay, good.
I would put it in the camp of good.
Yes, for sure,
because it's good movie. And yeah, I mean, I just it's a fun movie to talk about.
Oh, there's a lot there. There's a lot of layers to this movie, and I think you're right that your opinion of what you would do in a situation like that, I think it says a lot about you. I think you if you want to find a misogynist, ask him about It Follows. You're gonna hear some interesting things. Like, I heard a lot of like, just go have sex with a sex worker. And then it can't
there was a
track
lot
it.
of that, yeah.
And then it's like, oh, so sex workers, they're disposable to you. That's interesting. That's an interesting way to look at this. Yikes, guys. Yeah. I mean, I view it the same way as I do zombie movies. Like, Dave is offing himself in this situation. Dave is deucing out of this whole situation. Dave's not trying to escape. He's not trying to, if it's a zombie movie, not trying to recreate humanity. Dave's checking out. Because it's, that's the whole thing. It's coming back to you. It keeps tracking back. So, Maybe it's just lack of survival instinct. I'm like,
Well,
I'm in my 40s. I've done a lot. I'm happy. I'm good.
I'm just gonna give up.
Just if I was 20, maybe a little bit of a different answer. But at 44, 45, I'm like, I'm good. It's fine.
It's fine. Yeah.
I believe in a higher power. I probably got something locked up. It's fine.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about it. I mean, I guess you could go the sex worker route. Certainly some ambiguity there regarding the moral of that choice.
Yeah.
But promiscuity is really your only way out. And how you go about achieving that, there's a lot of gray area with that as well.
Sure.
And the film certainly gets into that in some compelling and harrowing ways. That's
yes,
for sure. And I think what's interesting about titling it "They," does that imply that there's now multiple it's?
It feels like it. It certainly feels like it. Unless we're going with like a non-binary horror story. That's an option.
The case.
But I was surprised that David Robert Mitchell decided to do a sequel. That shocked me. Maybe because Under the Silver Lake did so poorly that he's like, I don't know, maybe I need to cash some checks here.
And that could be it. I mean, I really liked Under the Silver Lake. It was a very polarizing film. I imagine that film didn't do all that well financially.
It was no It Follows, my friends.
It was no It Follows. So going back to the thing that did have success critically and financially, I don't blame him. Don't blame the guy.
My only thing is this better have a score by the same artist. If it doesn't, Disaster Piece. Yeah. If it doesn't, then like what are we doing here?
I know,
guys,
exactly. You have to have Disaster Piece there. And Micah Monroe is coming back too, I believe, right?
Yes, she is.
Did I read that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that's exciting. Yeah, I'm thrilled. I was honestly more excited for it. I like everyone else, I think we were all blown away that this was coming.
My favorite thing about the announcement of this is in the press release, the long-awaited sequel. What? No one was awaiting. Like none of us.
No one saw this coming. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was like, God, I really wonder when the sequel is finally gonna. It's not like it was like to be continued. It wasn't a Back to the Future ending. It was like, okay, we're done with this. Cool. That was a great movie. Time to move on. Long awaited, but no.
That's exactly why, to your point earlier, it did feel like a joke.
Yeah.
Like someone was pulling your leg, like, ha, ha, ha.
Yeah, I first saw it and I was like, okay, good one, guy. I was like, is it April 1st? And then I saw it like all over my X feed. Is like 9 different posts about it. I was like, oh my God, this is really happening.
It's really happening. Right. So, just wait. In a few years, Robert Eggers is coming back for The Witch 2.
I think it will be called The Witches.
The Witches.
Hopefully not a Roald Dahl take on The Witches.
But it'll have 2 S's. So it'll be the 2 V's
there you go.
And the 2 S's.
Oh, Lord.
That's how it'll book.
Someone, no. Please, God, no. I cannot stand like an entire season of people arguing about spelling of a Robert Eggers movie.
The Viviches.
I've had it.
Yeah. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. I'm very excited for it.
For sure.
And I'm sure we'll get some more information on that soon. All right, moving on to the next topic. Dave really was impassioned to talk about this whole Martin Scorsese intermission debacle.
Yeah.
I'm curious where you lean on it because people were up
where
in
I
arms
lean
about
on
it.
So, all right. Here's what I want to say.
Okay.
Intermissions are good. I do think at some level it would be nice to go back to a time where if a movie was like 3 hours long, we'd have an intermission built in. That would be great. Because people's bladders are only so large and, gives you time to kind of stretch your legs. And I get that. Yep. Wonderful. Wonderful. Of course, you run into problems. I do feel bad for like theater owners in this situation. Like, how do you tell who's bought a ticket and who's, so they're going to be like an intermission area, like you get like the smoking area in the airports that they used to have, like here, go in this box for 12 minutes and then you can come back. So But here's the thing. The reason that this became a long discussion is that certain theater owners in the United States decided of their own volition to institute an intermission in Killers of the Flower Moon, which, by the way, amazing movie. Wrote a review on it for InSession.
Very good. Yeah.
It's just a masterpiece because, of course, it is. But they decided, hey, the movie's, 3.5 hours long, so about an hour and 45 minutes into it. Just chop. We're just going to, okay, 15 minutes off, guys. Take a hike and come back. And here's the thing. If you see film as merely product, as merely content, one, you're probably not listening to this show. Let's be real.
That is true. Let's be real.
But if you do, I can understand that being like, okay, halfway. Film is art. Film has a flow. This is why editors are hired. So they can understand the flow of the movie. And yes, there are long movies that have intermissions. And that's wonderful. But there are choices being made as to when the intermission is. Because imagine if you're going along and there's a really intense moment and halfway through the scene, it's just like intermission. You're like, oh, God, what?
When it's purposefully built in, they have that in mind in the editing room. Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. And if you've ever gone to performances that have intermissions, people brought up the idea, I've seen Broadway shows and Broadway shows are 3 hours long and they have an intermission and they're not halfway through. Most of the times the intermissions are 2 hours in. So the second quote unquote half is shorter and you have a build. So you have an impactful moment right before the intermission, not just some random sequence where it's this is important to the plot. Of course it is, but it's not a powerful moment necessarily. There is a plan in place. And then there became a whole argument about actually not having intermissions is now ableist. And I was like, okay, I'm a pretty progressive guy, originally from California. I generally fall very left of center. But there comes a point where it's okay, this is why the other side hates us, because we say crazy things like this. I recently saw something online that someone said, actually, if you don't like AI art, that makes you an ableist, because some people can't create art. And I'm like, okay, you know what? We all, literally every human has limitations. And that's okay. It's part of the grand spectrum of humanity. I can't draw. You could put a gun to my head. If you needed me to draw something, Dave's brains would be splattered on the pavement because it's not going to happen. That's not in my skill set. There are things that I can do that other people can't. There are things that other people can do that I can't. And if you cannot fathom sitting down for 3.5 hours, which no shade here, that's a long sit, okay? And it's not as if they're barring the bathroom doors. You can go use the bathroom. Yes, you're going to miss 3 minutes of the movie. And, that stinks. But you know what? You can watch it on Apple TV Plus in 30 days. And you can figure it out. You can figure out what you missed. So it's it just became this thing that oh, who cares about the art? My bladder matters more than art. That's what you're saying. And I have a legitimate problem with that. Because film is an art form. It does mean something. Even the quote-unquote theme park movies, the popcorn movies, they mean something too. And, let's be real. Scorsese has become a target because of his opinions. I did not hear one word about urine when Avatar: The Way of Water came out. And that was 15 minutes shorter. Oppenheimer too. Yeah, that's 27 minutes shorter. I just want to know, what is the time limit for an ableist movie? I'm curious. Is it 2.5 hours? Is it 3 hours and 7? Lord in heaven. Are you kidding me? And it drove me nuts that so many people in a movie that is taking a look at such important things, such interesting things, has such amazing performances, and we are sitting online talking about piss breaks. Are you kidding me? And then you bring in the aspect of here's the business aspect of it. Theaters have a contract with these production companies, and they have decided on their own that they're going to make their own rules. And then people are mad at the production companies for saying we're going to yank the movie from your theater. they're perfectly within their rights to do it. And in my opinion, they should, if they care about cinema as art.
Yeah.
Like, you are spitting on Thelma's career. A woman who has worked with Marty her entire career and is a genius.
Yeah.
She, she's talked about this at length. Like, you want to call Marty's movies violent? No. I make them violent. I make those choices with him. She is an important part of the process, and you are taking the power out of her hands. And there are even people like, because she said, this is a huge problem, and I have a huge problem with it. People are like, oh, shut up, old lady. You're catch up with the times. We need to pee. And it was like, bring a bottle in. What do you do? What you got to do? Like, it's art.
I agree. No, I'm with you. And look, I do empathize with those that struggle to make it through these long movies, but
I'm one of them.
and here's the thing, I imagine anyway, if you're buying a ticket, you know what you're walking into, you know that it's 3 hours plus, and you have to accept that as you walk into the door. And I come at this with two different thoughts in addition to what you're saying. I wonder, because you're talking about how there are a few of these theaters doing this, the problem with injecting your own intermission, especially on your own volition, it's very possible that you're doing that at a different spot than this theater over here who's doing the same thing. Right. And now everyone is having very different experiences of this film. So that's a problem as well. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the film itself and the editing, and I wholeheartedly agree with you in terms of this being an art form. And this is, to me, one of Scorsese's most impactful movies. And what's so important, at least regarding the context of this conversation, that film presents itself stylistically in the vein of Martin Scorsese's patented crime drama formula, but it subverts that tonally. And it's one of his most dire, it's one of his least subtle movies. This is a film that wears its influences, or not its influences, its emotions, on its sleeve. Like, Scorsese is very impassioned about this material. And the way the film injects this vigor and this energy and this style to bring the audience in, as he has always done, and it sparks your interest, the film then subverts that tone. So for you to walk out at a certain moment, it's very possible you're going to miss that. And it could completely disrupt your experience. And that's why they didn't build an intermission into this movie, because of the structure that Scorsese was aiming for regarding this era, this existential era that we're in now with him, that I really love. So totally, I don't think the theaters are doing the film any justice by doing that, and I think it is hurting those that are going to see this. I think they're going to miss what Scorsese and Thelma are really wanting to achieve. And
Totally.
And so that's where I'm with you. I lean on the, hey, look, I get it, but at the same time, I don't agree with the theaters doing it in this specific instance. Yeah,
absolutely. If theaters had reached out to Apple TV Plus and Scorsese and were like, I just don't know if people will sit for this, and we want to sell as many tickets as possible. Is there a spot in this movie where we could put an intermission? But no, they just decided to make a choice. And it's like, no, you are the house for this. You are not the artists. Theater managers are not artists. They are necessary and wonderful, and theater employees put up with a lot that they shouldn't have to, and I empathize with that. But like, there's a difference here, and we need to respect the actual art. And how many times when a long movie is out, people are like, well, the pacing, I just didn't like the pacing, which just usually means I'm impatient and the movie took too long. But if you're going to complain about pacing, if that's going to be one of your things, you can't just have a theater owner or manager decide, I'm going to change I'm just going to hit the brakes for 12 minutes because people need to get up and walk around. Like it's legitimate. Like I know that I'm passionate about this, but I find it legitimately artistically negligent and insulting to do something like this. Like, and I don't care what movie it is. I don't care if it's, Blue Beetle, which I liked, by the way, a comic book movie I actually enjoyed. But if you randomly at the hour mark went like, everyone take a walk, I'd be like, what? No, I'm into this. We're in the middle of a fight sequence. What are you talking about? Like, it's a problem.
Yeah, in a film that very clearly didn't have that intent. There's, and to your point earlier, there's a lot of classic epics that have an intermission, and you can sense the film building to it. And there's a conclusion. It makes sense. It's artistically interwoven into the fabric of the everything those films are doing.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite movie of all time has an intermission. Lawrence of Arabia has an intermission that is purposeful and creates a moment. And that is not what's happening here. Like, I can just imagine you're sitting there and then what happens? Like, the screen just goes black and it's like, and a theater employee comes out, everyone, it's intermission time.
Yeah.
Because they don't have a screen thing that says intermission. Like, it's not built into the reel, so it's probably some poor employee.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Who's making minimum wage or a little bit more, and having to come in and usher everyone out and usher everyone back in.
It's going to be an awkward edit. It really is.
Totally.
And honestly, I'm trying to think here off the cuff. I don't even know of a spot in the film where it even makes sense.
That's why it isn't there. Because the whole point of that movie is to feel the crushing process of time. And if you don't, then you're missing. It is. I actually heard someone, as I was walking out of the theater, the first time I saw it, I've seen it twice now. Yes, I've spent 7 hours of my life watching Killers of the Flower Moon. But after the first time I walked out, I heard someone say it was slow but not boring. And I was like, yeah. Absolutely. That's totally accurate. It is a deliberately paced movie. And if you just throw 15 minutes of silence in the middle of it, sorry, I didn't mean that as a pun on Scorsese's other movie, of no sound and no picture, then we have an issue.
Yeah. And the thing about it is it's methodical in its pacing, but I still feel like with its ideas, the characters, the drama, it's still a very enticing movie. Like there's a lot of riveting components to it.
I just want everyone to know I am holding back so much because I know you have probably already done a review of this, and I could just talk for an hour and a half about how great Killers of the Flower Moon.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because Brendan and I did go an hour 40. Granted, the first 10 minutes
that's only half the length of the movie. That's
which we joked
bad.
about.
Yeah,
because our Wes Anderson Henry Sugar review, which contained all 4 shorts, our conversation of
what's that, like an hour and 10 minutes altogether?
No, it was probably like an hour. It was longer than the 4 stitched together. Yeah, it was longer than the actual movie, and so then we joked, of course, with Killers of the Flower Moon. We went about half the length of the movie.
Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah. So yeah, we did pretty well, and it was one of our most thorough to date, I would say. People want to go and check that out, it's available right now.
Yeah, you should. It deserves that thorough kind of treatment because that is a dense movie. And I saw, even some people in our own in-session Slack be like, it's lower tier Scorsese, kind of boring. And I was like, cool, congratulations for missing the point. I'm glad we had this little chat. Because if that's all you walk away from, it's like, but... Yeah. But it's been an interesting conversation in general because I've gotten to hear a lot of native voices talking about this movie on both sides. Some people very upset for valid reasons. Some people really grateful for valid reasons. Yeah. And it's been interesting to just kind of sit back and watch that conversation.
Well, and that's the other thing with the movie. And I don't want to say that, hey, you inject a 5-10 minute intermission that people... the movie will be completely ruined. I don't think that is the case, but I do think there's a momentum that could very much stifle the experience.
Yeah.
But what I find the film so fascinating in regards to what you're talking about, I mean, this is something Scorsese directly speaks to at the end of that film regarding the idea, I guess without getting into spoilers for anyone that hasn't seen it, but he speaks to the idea that he's the one that has to tell this story, otherwise it doesn't get made. And and that he probably shouldn't be the one telling the story, but he has to.
Yep, and maybe Scorsese's best ending in his career.
It's very good.
It's going to be polarizing. There are going to be people who are very upset by it and don't like it, but I was like, I got chills as I was watching that ending.
I agree.
So
and again, what I love about the movie is that structurally it's Goodfellas, it's The Wolf of Wall Street, it's his patented style, but it tonally is very subversive, and the ending is that maybe the most quintessentially. And I love that Scorsese wears his emotions on his sleeve.
Totally.
And at the end, it gets very meta in that regard.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And the really depressing thing about, being on social media with things like this, is like people have made this comment before, but like, man, media literacy is at an all-time low. Like, without giving anything away in this movie, I saw somebody saying that Scorsese sees Leo's character as the hero of the story. And I was like, bro, no. Like, like, Scorsese clearly despises that character and makes it a point. There's so much I want to say, but I'm not going to for people who haven't seen it because I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't and understands.
It's not subtle, and that's the other thing, Dave.
No, and yet people are so full. Like, protagonists mean good. Like, no, that's not what's happening. And it's even more offensive than when people did it with Wolf of Wall Street. I can see getting to that point with Jordan Belfort, but like with Ernest, like, bro. He hates him. He's despicable, and everyone knows it by the end of the movie. And you're just like, how did you get there? How did you? I don't understand.
I completely agree.
Like, were you on your phone the whole movie? You're just like, Leo's pretty hot. Yeah, he must be the good guy. Anyway,
I agree. And that's the thing. Like, a lot of Scorsese's characters do things that are, we'll say, morally gray.
That's a nice way to put it.
That's a nice way to put it, being a little generous there.
Yes, a little bit.
And with this film, I don't think that he's even in that gray area. I think this is very one-sided, both him and De Niro's character as well. And I love that it's one-sided. That's why the performances are important to that movie. Anyway, we don't have to get into another review of it, but
yes,
yeah,
just go watch it. It's amazing. Watch it.
Great movie, and try to find a theater that
doesn't have an intermission. Good Lord!
Just understand it's 3.5 hours, and do your best to prepare beforehand.
Yeah.
And
just don't break the seal. Don't drink a bunch of water.
Yeah.
Just do your best.
Exactly.
And if you have to leave, go see the movie again.
Yeah,
see it twice. It's worth it.
To Dave's point, it will come to Apple TV soon-ish. Yeah,
probably in like a month. Yeah,
in like
absolutely.
a month or so.
And this is a movie I think even if you quote unquote get spoiled, I don't think it ruins anything. I think the journey of how you get there is a lot more important than the like Wikipedia plot points. Like,
exactly. I mean, it's also based off history.
Sure.
It's not easy to find
but even,
information about
not to get into this too deeply, but in the book, it's put forward like a mystery. And in the movie, like, within like 40 minutes, you know exactly who's going to do the terrible things. Like, they're not interested in police work in this version of that story.
Exactly. I noted earlier, we talked about how Scorsese isn't very subtle here. The very first scene between De Niro and Leo establishes who these guys are. Like, there is no ambiguity whatsoever.
I do like that money, sir.
Exactly. Like, from the moment we meet them, they're like, okay, here we go.
That's who you are.
There's
Got
no
it.
denying them.
Noted.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, moving on. One other topic that we're going to get into before we get to Miss Sofia Coppola. And I noted earlier, Dave somewhat teased this, being in Lexington, Kentucky, and I certainly relate. Many of you may remember, for new listeners out there, that don't know, I lived in Lexington for the good part of a decade before I moved to Florida.
Yeah, I had to wait for you to leave, and then I was like, okay,
they
it's
waited
safe.
for me to leave, and then he moved. How rude. So I can understand where he's coming from. But Dave wanted to talk about the challenges of being in the conversation when you live outside of these major cities that we talked about earlier, specifically LA, New York, Chicago, Houston. But even in Miami, I'm sure I get a lot of these movies even before you do. But
oh, yeah. Almost guaranteed, yes.
Yeah. So where do you want to begin with this conversation?
So I think a lot of this really has to do with, I think there is a class difference. I think there is an attitude of folks who give, and you have to remember, it's a privilege to be able to see these early, or to be able to have the type of money to go to film festivals.
Yeah.
I've never been to a film festival because, man, I got bills. I can't be spending thousands of dollars on plane flights and food and lodging, and I can't do it. So that means I'm put in this position where it's like, I guess I can't go online until January if I don't. I mean, legitimately, like these these festivals happen, months in advance of a normal release, even if you live in New York, LA, Chicago, Austin, all those great places. Even if you live there, the film festival crowd, and they're, and I get it. They have to be first, and they got to get the numbers. I mean, that's how these websites survive. But I also end up having an issue because, and I got to be careful here because I know a lot of people that listen to this show are awards folk. I'm not awards folk. I enjoy the Academy Awards. I enjoy watching them. I enjoy thinking about them. But it can become this very weird competition of like, this is what's going to win. And if you don't think it's going to win, you're an idiot. And this kind of like really negative,
can be insufferable at times.
It becomes as insufferable as sports discourse, which is pretty dang insufferable.
That's because, and I've said this before, the Oscars is sports.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
what it is.
It's betting, and Gold Derby has really come into this because of that reason. So that's a piece of it. And then if you go online and you hear spoilers for a movie that hasn't come out anywhere but 3 major cities, honest to God, the response you often get, well, you just need to stay off the internet. If you're not ready to be spoiled, you need to stay off the internet. And it's like, I live in a place that, granted, it's a college town, it's pretty liberal, there are a lot of advantages to it. Movies ain't one of them. It's gotten better in the last couple years, and I think honestly that's because of COVID and because there were so few movies that were being released that we got to get everything because we can't even fill up the screens, right? Yeah. But as someone who used to live in an area that was privileged, right? I lived in San Jose, California. I could get to San Francisco in an hour. So I had more opportunities to see this stuff. Yeah. And I just think it stinks that based on where you live, you can either be a part of the conversation or you have to shut up and you have to block Twitter from your phone because God forbid you find something out about a movie because some movies are unspoilable. Most movies are not. Most movies, if you find out the ending to it, you're going to be like, oh, well, now that's in my head. Right? So basically the rich get richer. So unless you can move to New York or LA, you're SOL. And that's a really unfortunate situation. Like, you want to talk about theme park movies and, Marvel and Star Wars taking up screens. And if you're in New York and LA, I got to be real. I don't want to hear from you because you can go to the New Beverly. And if you're in New York, there's like literally 12 theaters in like a 20-mile radius. You can see literally everything. You have the option. If a new Star Wars movie or a new Marvel movie comes out in Lexington, Kentucky, that's 80% of the screens. So very few of the movies I really want to see and the movies that are going to be lasting. I was stunned at the large release of something like Killers of the Flower Moon. And it stinks that cinephiles, people who love movies, who don't happen to be millionaires and have enough money to live in California, which, by the way, the reason why I left is because I could not afford groceries with a full-time job. So I, had to move, right? Let alone movies. Forget movies. I couldn't eat. So there are
Wild. Absolutely wild.
So and I make less money here and could do whatever I want in Lexington, Kentucky. No problem. But it just becomes like no opportunity. And it shouldn't be like that. We should be able to see, like, there are enough screens. That's not the issue. And it's not as if these big budget movies are selling out anymore. And yet, you talked about Anatomy of a Fall. I can't see that. That's been in film festivals for 5 months. Yeah. I know everything about it because I'm an editor of a website. So I edited a review of that. And that was months ago. By the way, Hector, our writer, wrote a very, very wonderful review of that. You should check it out. It's great. Mm-hmm. But as a film fan, it gets really, really frustrating. But the most frustrating part, JD, is when I go online and these holier-than-thou monsters are like, well, if you're a real movie fan, why aren't you seeing blank? Bro, I don't live in LA. That's why. That shit drives me crazy. And people have started to figure it out. And you start to see posts that if it's available in your area, you should check this out. That's fine. But in general, if you don't live in LA, New York, Chicago, Austin, San Francisco, maybe Miami, it's not that we don't want to support art and support great film and support movies that might win awards. It's we literally cannot. And then the film industry gets all mad when people pirate things. Yeah. Well, if it's available everywhere except where I live, sorry guys, see how much money I've spent on movies in my life? I don't feel bad for a second.
And we live in a world where the studios can pull these movies off these websites anytime they want.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, it just happened. Happened, passing a quote-unquote Netflix original, which I know, not really a Netflix original. They bought it at Sundance, I think, for like $16 million. But it's the only place that Passing was available. Passing does not have a physical release. So now this movie that just came out less than a decade ago, for right now at this moment, it doesn't exist. Except if you get a torrent. That's the only way.
To be fair, I believe, and this is where news websites especially, I'm not even going to dance around it. It's clickbait. It's just all clickbait because they want to grab the click. But the reality of that situation is that it was only in the UK, and it had something to do with a contract dispute with Film 4. There was something weird going on there. I don't know the specific details. I just know it has something to do with some dispute with them in the UK. So in the United States, it's still there. But
this is the problem with streaming. If they decided to, they could. They could just remove it.
But and it's happened before. Disney just did this, right? They got in trouble because they pulled off originals off of Disney Plus.
Yep.
So it's liable to happen at any time.
Even if you buy stuff on iTunes, if that gets removed by Apple, you don't own it. It's not yours. You think you do, but it's just a little tag on the internet somewhere. And if they decide to remove it, that money you spent, sorry, that's gone. Which is why I, have custom shelving in my house for all my Blu-rays because I live in constant terror that these companies are evil because they are.
Because they are, yeah. And a server goes down, it's blown to hell, AI overlords take over.
It's coming.
Who knows? There's a lot that could happen.
I'm locking myself in my house with all my physical media. No one is welcome. You're all robots.
But to speak to what Dave is saying, I very much do empathize with a lot of what you're saying, and maybe there's a disparity between some that live on the coast that have no context of what it's like to live in the middle of the country where it's really challenging. And that was the hardest part of doing InSession Film from Lexington for
I can't imagine
6, 7, 8 years because there's only a handful of theaters. There is the indie theater, the Kentucky theater, which is great, but they only have the capability of 3 or 4 films at a time.
3.
And even when they're able to get the Anatomies of a Fall, for example, it's not always within the same time frame as everybody else.
And for less time. Like, that's the other thing about these small movies. I can't tell you how times I have this discussion with my wife, and she's like, do we have to see it this week? I'm like, yeah, because I guarantee you it will not be there next week. Like, it's going to be gone.
And I even have that problem in Miami because, at least with where I'm at, I'm more in the Fort Lauderdale area, so I'm probably 45 minutes-ish north of actual Miami. If I go to South Miami, some of these movies can perhaps last more than a week. But up where I am, if I want to see a movie like Passages, for example, I had to go the week that it was out, to your point, because it was here for a week and it was gone. Right. And that's it. So even when I do get access to these films, it's often not for a long time. And for Dave, the only other option that I had, if the Kentucky Theater didn't have it, and it's rare that the AMCs or the Regals would get some of these smaller and
by the way,
movies.
The AMC in Lexington is no longer here. It's gone. So there's like 3 theaters in the entire city.
That's even more dire than I even realized.
Yep.
But even when I was there, you had the large AMC by the mall, and there was a Regal, and there was probably 4 or 5 options, but it was still hard to get these smaller movies.
Yeah.
And if I was really desperate and wanted to see them, I had to travel. There are some really nice indie theaters in Cincinnati, Ohio. The Esquire is one that
90 minute, just a quick 90-minute drive away.
90-minute drive away. And that's the only other option for Dave and others in his situation. If he wants to go see Anatomy of a Fall, sure, he can go to the Esquire tomorrow and see that movie. But it's a 90-minute drive one way.
I remember talking to a couple friends of mine on Twitter, and they're like, "Oh, is there like they didn't say is there. They said, "So what's the film festival in your state?" And I was like, the what now? We don't, I don't know if you've ever been here, bro, but we don't do stuff like that. Like, I'm like hyped because the Kentucky Theater, as you mentioned, which is this great independent theater that just reopened. I mean, they're doing a Tarkovsky. They're showing all 7 of his movies, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait, But that's as close as we get to a film festival in Lexington. Is some there's a professor of Russian literature from UK that really wanted us to do this at the Kentucky Theater, so he brought it to them. They're like, sure, and that's how we got our little Tarkovsky festival.
Yeah. And the festivals is really hard. I mean, even here in Miami, there is a Miami Film Festival, but it's nowhere near the scale of LA and New York and Chicago, for example.
Right.
So it's, and they don't always get the bigger films that you're really itching to see.
Right.
It's a little bit of I guess, a toss of the coin in that regard. And then the other big thing as well, when I look at this conversation, especially in comparison to my peers, and I don't know the disparity between myself and others, but it seems I would venture to say, unless this is your full-time gig and you're being paid to go to these festivals, but others that are in my situation, I would venture to say that a lot of them do not have kids. Because that is the biggest hurdle for me. It's hard for me to get away, even if I can manage it financially. And sometimes that's a struggle when you have 2 kids.
That's a leap already. Yeah.
But even if I can manage it, and a lot of the times I probably can, but I have 2 kids that demand my attention all the time just to do this show or to even see movies themselves is a full-time job. I have to balance out when we're recording these shows. I have to do it at a specific time, which thankfully in this case, Dave was flexible. Brennan has been flexible for years.
You know why I'm flexible? Because you know what I don't have? Kids. Yes.
Exactly. Or even when I see movies, like I can't just go to a movie at 6:30 at night. I can't go to a movie at 7:30 at night. I have to wait for my kids to go to bed before I can even begin to think about watching.
I mean, you had to wait like a week to see the new Scorsese movie.
Because of events going on here regarding my kids. So like going to I would love to go to TIFF. I would love to go to New York or AFI or whatever. Like I'd love to go to these things, but I can't just abandon my kids on a whim.
Let's not say can't. I mean, you're choosing not to because you're a good father. Like,
yeah, I guess I could. I don't know if I would have a home to come back to if I just left on
the locks might be changed by the time you got back.
Exactly. And I don't want to necessarily lose that. So that's the biggest hurdle for someone in my situation.
Right.
So if you're listening to this and you want to be a critic and this is the path you want to follow, I love having kids. I think it's one of the greatest miracles and experiences you can have. But if this is the thing you want to do full time,
don't have kids.
Don't have kids.
No, you're not going to be able to do any of this. Absolutely. And I was just thinking about like kind of this idea of like these movies come out month and month. Like I can't believe that I haven't seen Maestro because I've heard so much about that movie. I feel like that movie's been out a year and a half. Like it just like I was just like, wow, I think I've seen 25 different people I know write reviews of that movie. Mm-hmm. And that's a movie I probably won't be able to see until the new year in Lexington.
Yeah, I mean...
I might not see that before the Oscars. Like, this is crazy.
And what's funny, because I think it just played at AFI, like, the night before we were recording this, something to that effect. But it also played, I think, at TIFF or Toronto, or not Toronto, but TIFF and New York, I meant to say.
Yep, so, played it both.
Yeah. So a lot of our peers that went to see it again the other night are talking about how, this is my second viewing of Maestro, and this is how I feel on a second viewing. And I'm like, I'm desperate just to see this movie.
I haven't even seen a trailer in a theater. Exactly. And I go to the movies every week. Like, this is... so here is my ultimate pet peeve. And all you awards nonsense people, stop doing this, okay? Stop saying, I'm finally watching insert movie that hasn't been released to the public yet. You're not finally watching anything. You're getting to watch it earlier than 95% of filmgoers. You're being a jerk, even if you're not meaning to, because I'm sitting there in podunk Lexington, Kentucky, knowing I'm not going to be able to see it for 6 months, and you're like, finally, I'm seeing it so late, and I just want to throttle you whenever you post something like that.
This is exactly why, I don't know anyone listening, if you've ever listened to the InSession Film Awards, we have always, we don't go year by year. The InSession Film cycle is not January 1st to January 1st. We go from mid-January to mid to late January. That's our yearly cycle. Because we give ourselves a 2-week window, because when we lived in Lexington, we needed it to be able to catch up on some of these awards movies that were being released, let's say, late December, but we couldn't get access to them until those first 2 weeks of January. So we had to give ourselves that window so we could catch up with them and then have our top 10 list in InSession Film Awards. That's why we've always done it mid-January, because
I mean, what was the year like a Most Violent Year came out and everyone was like, Oscar
that
movie,
one was hard.
It came out December 28th or something.
Okay, that one I think we just missed. And that's a film that would have absolutely been in my top 20.
Oh yeah, of course.
Patterson, the Jim Jarmusch film, I think was another one that we.
I mean, it's like every year there's one. Every year.
And any Scorsese's Silence, I think, was one that we just got in the nick of time.
Silence was, and then Phantom Thread was
Phantom Thread was and Phantom Thread and Silence, we were able to see in time for the InSession Film Awards, but because of the 2-week window, if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have made it by the end of
And,
December.
to drive the point home, those two movies are in my top 10 of that decade. Movies that I love and saw at my first opportunity. And yet I couldn't see. And then I had heard about them for 3 months.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
Absolutely. So, look, if you're on the West Coast or the East Coast, Chicago even, Chicago's a huge market for film.
Yeah.
And I love that city. If I could convince my wife to move anywhere, it might be the Chicago area.
Nice.
I absolutely adore it. But she would never live in the cold, so here
I was
we
going to
are
say,
in
no soft
sunny
people
South
there, man. You are in real winter.
Yes.
there.
One of my favorite stories, and sorry, this is a little bit of a rabbit hole, but a funny one. And this, I guess, circles back actually to this conversation. It's appropriate, it turns out. At the end of 2013, 2013 was our inaugural year. And again, this is me coming to the realization, I live in Lexington, Kentucky. I can't see all of these movies by the end of December. So we need some buffer room. Mm-hmm. And so one of the last big movies I need to see in 2013 is Spike Jonze's Her. And of course, Lexington is not getting that movie until mid to late January, right?
If you're lucky.
So,
yeah.
the film is playing in Chicago. And I, on a whim, this is like a Thursday, and I convinced Brandy, let's go to Chicago this weekend. And of course, she's asking why. And
Yeah.
I
Already
tell
like
her, there's a movie I desperately want to see before we do our award show, and it's the only place that has.
She must
that's
have given you
anyone
that look like, oh God, what
She thought
did
it was
I
crazy.
get it?
But of course, and again, circling back to what I said earlier, we didn't have kids yet. It was just her and I, so it was a lot more feasible.
It was just her and I. Nice. Well done.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pun intended. And so we go. It's 6 hours from Lexington, and we drive. We drive to Lexington, or
6
or
hours for a 2 hour movie.
For a 2 hour movie, we drive all the way there. We spend the whole weekend, and it's a great time. Of course, we see the movie, and honestly, it's one of our favorite memories. We love talking about the story because it was such a great time. Yeah. But aside from seeing the movie, I'll never forget this as long as I live. And again, she's from South Florida. She does not handle the cold all that well. And we're in Chicago, where it's much worse than Lexington. It's January 1st, so it is dead winter. And we're in Chicago, and she wants to go see where the Ferris wheel is there on the pier and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it's January 1st. So it's not like it's the summer, it's not warm, but she still wants to go see it. Now, when you're in downtown Chicago, yes, it's cold, it's windy, but you're still blocked by all the buildings. So you can walk from one neighborhood to the next. It's not as bad as you would think because the buildings do block a lot of it. However, to get to the pier, you're moving away from buildings at that point. So we start to walk toward the pier, the buildings fade in the distance, and this is also like 8 o'clock at night, so there's no sun anymore. And the wind just picks up drastically, and it's cold. Even I am at this point. I'm like,
it
I
cuts
think we
through
should
you.
turn around. We can come back at a later time. But she keeps on trekking, and I just kind of stopped there for a second, and I looked at her. I was like, I'm going to cherish this moment because I can barely stand this. And there she goes. Like, she just keeps on going.
I want to see a Ferris wheel. I am like just.
She was like not going to be. Well, eventually I grabbed her and I said, this is too much. We'll come back another time.
Right.
And actually we ended up going the next day, like during the day when the sun was out and it wasn't nearly as bad. And then we went back later the next summer we went back and experienced it in its full glory. But yeah, that was
good
one
time
of
to
those,
do that.
Exactly.
Summer is better, yes.
Definitely one of those memories that I cherish, but it's one of those wild stories that only exists because of what we're talking about. I had to go to another city that had it because you're not going to have those privileges in Lexington. Yeah. And when you live in these big cities, I think maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect there. I don't think you fully realize.
Definitely. Unless you have moved there from one of these areas for that reason. And all I ask as a human being is just like the hint of gratefulness. To understand that you are in a lucky position that you get to do, that you could just be like, oh, I'll get in a car and drive for 7 minutes and I'll see the movie that everyone wants to see. That's a privilege. So just show a little bit of gratefulness and a little bit of awareness that there are people that don't have the ability to do that, especially if you're a person who gets to go to 4 or 5 of these film festivals a year.
Yeah.
Like, even if I had access, the cost is so prohibitive that there's no way I could do what you do. So just be like, oh, I'm really grateful and happy I get to do this. How lucky am I in my life? That's it.
I agree. No, I very much.
I'm not saying don't go because I can't. I mean, I kind of want to say that, but like that's not fair. So,
yeah, Dave feeling a little indignant in that regard. I will say this, my last final thought, and then we can get to Sophia. If you're in the same circumstance as me, in the sense that you have a day job, but you're also in the film sphere, and you have kids, and also somehow managed to go to these film festivals, I desperately need to talk to you. I have to know how you have figured this out, because that is such a struggle for me.
Yeah, it's
almost
easy.
a miracle.
No, JD, it's easy. It's child abuse. It's easy. Just pure
I
neglect.
want to know how you do it.
Just pure neglect. Just... there's a box of mac and cheese. I'll be back in a few days. It's fine.
And maybe that's all it is, but I need to talk to someone.
Or like the most understanding partner that has ever existed. Like,
and maybe that's the real answer there, because that's
a lot.
where I struggle with all of this. But at any rate, all right, Dave, we need to talk about coffee. Everyone's favorite beverage.
Yes, sir.
I have an IV injected into me at all times.
I think it's the only way we survive. It's the only way we can record late at night. It's the only way you can raise your kids without losing your mind. Like, you gotta have that extra burst for sure.
Exactly, and that's why we love Coffee Cult, because they source the best coffee, specialty grade Arabica coffee from over 50 countries around the world. They inspect all of them. They're not trying to cheapen the product with defects. They don't use Robusta beans as a lot of companies do, because Robusta's cheap. It's easy to produce. Let's throw that in a blend. No. Robusta tastes like garbage. And it's no bueno. So they don't use it. It's all about the quality. Equally, they are interested in making sure that the farms they're working with are doing everything fairly and equally, paying their workers as they should, especially women. That's something that is top of mind for them as well. And they roast to order, which means that your coffee just isn't sitting around in some warehouse getting stale or sitting on a grocery store shelf for God knows how long. No, this coffee is roasted once the order comes in. So every bag you get is guaranteed fresh. And that's, what's better than that? Freshly roasted coffee.
Nothing.
And it's amazing. And they have all kinds of blends. They got single origin coffees. And with the holidays coming up, they have a holiday blend that I am addicted to. It is really fantastic. So you want to go and check all of that out. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF and you'll get 15% off. Again, that code is ISF for 15% off at coffeecult.com. All right, Dave, let's talk about the InSession Film Store. It's everyone's favorite.
That's right.
We got all kinds of fun t-shirts available. We have a couple of new ones. I'm working on some others. Like right now I'm working on one. I'm just going to go ahead and unveil this. It's not finished yet. I don't know what the end product will look like, but I'm working on an Amy Adams Arrival themed shirt.
Okay.
That I think everyone will love, because
hard to go wrong.
Yeah, that's the best. One of my favorite movies. But right now we have our two most recent ones. We have a Midnight Special inspired shirt with Michael Shannon, of course, on it. It says, "I'll always worry about you. That's the deal." One of my favorite quotes. To something that we've talked about on this show already when it comes to awards. We've mentioned award season briefly. And, one of the things with awards discourse, because, again, it's sports. That's what the Oscars is. It's sports. It's a competition. And fandoms in film are not dissimilar to sports, right?
They're worse. Yes.
Fair. But it's kind of the same. Like
Totally.
when La La Land and Moonlight were out and competing for Best Picture, it reminded me, as someone that's big in the sports, like especially college football, like those heated like college football rivals, the Michigan, Ohio States of the world. You
mean the Ohio State?
Sure, whatever. Fine. That's what it was like. It was insane, just utterly biased fandoms, like college football going toe to toe. That's what it was.
This is great and this is terrible. The worst movie ever made. Like, okay.
That's what it was.
I hate
there was
jazz.
No in between. There was no in between. Now, of course, when it comes to art, I struggle to have that mindset. Yeah, I love sports, but I don't treat film as sports. So I think, and I know this is a hot take, I think it is perfectly reasonable. And again, brace yourself. I think it's reasonable to like both movies.
God, I will not sit here and listen to this nonsense. If it wouldn't make such a loud noise, I'd be knocking things off my desk. How dare you? You must choose one.
I know, God forbid. So, in the spirit of that, our latest t-shirt it just says the best thing that ever happened to La La Land is that it lost Best Picture to Moonlight. So that way everyone can be happy. La La Land can live in peace. Moonlight has its Oscar. It's great. It's win-win. So We're celebrating both of those movies with this t-shirt.
Yeah, we're trying to get you all to be better. Like, don't be like those awards people. Enjoy art for art's sake, not just because it's going to win a golden statue.
Yeah, and look, I say that as someone that enjoys the Oscars for what it is. Same. I'm not against the Oscars. I just find the discourse a little...
What if I came on here and I was like anti-Oscars? Like, every movie that's ever won an Oscar is bad by being around it.
Well, we'd have to have a conversation about that then, Dave, because that's not true either, but...
it is for me. It's like, okay.
But, it would fit the spirit of the conversation at times. At any rate, that's available. But we have, other T-shirts available. We got a Barbie-inspired one. We got a Star Wars-inspired T-shirt up there. All kinds of fun things. Go to InSessionFilm.com/store, or you can go see it on TeePublic directly at tpublic.com/store/InSessionFilm. But go and check all of that out. We have some fun things up there. And the designs don't just come in T-shirts. If you want wall art, mugs, stickers, magnets, all kinds of fun things. But you can go and check all of that out, again, at InSessionFilm.com/store. Let's talk about the wonderful Sofia Coppola. As we noted earlier, she's got a new film coming out called Priscilla. Very much looking forward to it. Dave will probably get it March 3rd.
Yeah, that sounds about right. No, that's actually coming out. It's coming out in like 5 days. I'm getting that one. I'm hyped. Yeah. I will be there, quote unquote, opening night, now that I've read 19,000 reviews of it from the last month. Yes. Yeah.
Of course. Very much looking forward to it as well. Let's just start, I guess, a little bit broad here. What do you think of Miss Sofia Coppola as a filmmaker?
Before I say that, can I talk about how offended I am, JD, that apparently you only invite me on for Italian directors? Like, what? Okay, is it because my last name ends in a vowel too?
Maybe
like
that has something to do with
Scorsese, Coppola. I mean, I love both these directors. Don't get me wrong, but I'm a little unnerved.
It is funny how that worked out. Maybe Brendan decided to be on the main show last week.
Ah,
just to
so
split that
Brendan
up.
hates
Brendan's
Italians.
fault.
I get it. Okay, that's probably why he hates Brooklyn. It makes sense now.
Yeah. Exactly. It's all coming full circle.
Now I get it. No, Sofia Coppola. What an amazing, interesting career already. You know, pretty much the film world's introduction to her was, of course, the very ill-fated performance in The Godfather Part 3, which actually just recently, not that recently, but like, I don't know, 5-6 months ago, watched Godfather Coda, the kind of
I still have yet to see the Coda. Is it good? Better?
No.
Okay, the same?
It's terrible. I mean, it's just, you know, I love The Godfather. I was raised on the Godfather movies, my father's favorite movies. Godfather 3 is a bad movie. It's a bad movie. I'm sorry.
Okay.
And she might be the worst part. She's pretty bad. She's not a good actress. She's just not, you know, and I think if I remember right, she was a last minute replacement for Winona Ryder, I think was going to be in that role. So, you know, I can't hate on her for that.
Imagine being a filmmaker. Oh, look, this actress.
What about my daughter? Just throw her in there.
Yeah.
Right.
Sophia, I need you to come fill this role for me.
I need you to memorize like 40 pages of dialogue that is like vaguely incestuous, and we're just gonna do it like, oh guys, not good. So that's the introduction. So for years she was kind of a joke, right? Before she became a director, she was a joke, and then all of a sudden she's amazing. She's one of our best working directors.
Yep.
She's got, I mean, I have to be honest, I didn't see On the Rocks. I still haven't seen that one.
Good movie.
And I'm sure it is, because I've liked every other movie I've seen of hers. And I think that's the only one. I think maybe she did something right before The Virgin Suicides. It's like very not seen very often and not super available.
Lick
but
the
everything
Star,
else.
The short film, and then
I
she
haven't seen
New York
that.
Stories,
But everything else, you know, it's always interesting. Like we talk, you know, if you're a film person, you know, we always talk about rankings, right? And I think it's misleading with both directors, for me, like Sofia Coppola and Martin Scorsese, is that there's so much good. Like you'll see a movie low on my ranking of that director. It's still like a 4.5 star movie. It's still great. And I throw Sofia Coppola in that mix. And she's one of those directors that I wish she was just a little bit more prolific. I wish we got more Sofia Coppola movies. But the other side of that is she clearly puts a lot of care and a lot of love and a lot of really important choices into the movies that she does make. She doesn't take much lightly. Like she really, and you know, I guess her dad is similar, although I bet if you took the average rating of all of his movies, Sofia's might be higher, because there's some stinkers in Francis Ford Coppola's filmography.
Yes.
He very clearly was like, all right, I will do this because you'll pay me a crazy amount of money and then I can, you know, put it into the movie I really want to make. She's never been in that position because, you know, you want to talk about quote unquote nepotism and all that stuff. She definitely probably got a lot of opportunities because of her name, but that does not mean she's not a supremely talented director. She's incredible. Big fan. We talked about this last time with the Scorsese episode. I did a podcast called The Podcast Directed By. Sofia Coppola was where we started. And it was one of those that like, oh yeah, I like Sofia Coppola. And then you go through and watch all her movies. Like, I really like Sofia Coppola. She made a lot of really great movies. Like just, and it's so good to have so many female-led movies with a voice behind it and someone who gets a budget to work with. Because so many female, I mean, think about like Kelly Reichardt, who is an amazing director.
Love Kelly Reichardt.
And in order to make money, she works as a teacher.
Yeah.
Because no one will give her money to make the movie she wants. So she has to raise her own funds and work on shoestring budgets. And it's nice that Sofia Coppola gets to make these big kind of in her way, bombastic movies as far as cost goes, and that's been fun to see. And I think she's only gotten better as a director as she's gone.
I agree. No, I completely am with you. I love Sofia Coppola as a filmmaker. Her acting career, as short-lived as it was, maybe not great. Yes. But yes, as a director, she really is one of the best we have working today. I don't believe I've seen Somewhere. That's my only blind spot. But everything else...
Oh, that feels like a JD movie. I think you would... It's relatively low in my ranking, but it feels like a movie you would like quite a lot.
Okay. Yeah. I love everything else that she's done. Even On the Rocks. And I know that was a little bit polarizing. People hailed that as lesser Sofia Coppola.
Lost in Translation 2? That's... right?
Kind of, yeah. In a way, in its own little way. Tonally very different, though.
Yes.
Than Lost in Translation. Speaking of, though, her second movie and a legitimate masterpiece. One of the best films of that decade and arguably the best film of 2003, which it was for me. Incredible that she was able to achieve that. And I know I'm not alone in thinking that about Lost in Translation, but The Virgin Suicides is also very good, a hell of a directorial debut.
Incredible.
And then
coming out of the box with Virgin Suicides is...
Yeah.
Wow.
Light material.
Yeah, super chill.
Pretty light and, relaxing movie, The Virgin Suicides. But she handles that material with incredible deftness. Lost in Translation, she gets these incredible performances. There's a quietness to that film that I love. And then she goes from those two to Marie Antoinette, which is this rock star
best movie.
Re-envisioning.
Her best movie.
I love it. I
So
love
good.
Marie Antoinette. I'm in the bag for Lost in Translation, but Marie Antoinette is probably my second favorite. It's between that and the Beguiled. I'm pretty big on the Beguiled as well, but
I think we have
Marie
have a strangely different list, which is funny when there's only like 7 movies, right?
Yeah.
Like you would think like, okay, there's going to be a pretty standard way we look at this, but Lost in Translation, great for its time, is a movie that has not aged well for me. I've rewatched it and I still like it.
Same.
I think it's a very, very good movie, but it doesn't quite hit the same way. I think Marie Antoinette is just about a perfect movie. I think she plays with music. She plays with anachronisms in this really interesting way that still somehow feels genuine. It never gets so crazy that I'm like, okay, I'm out of the movie now. You still are getting, and it helps when you have Kirsten Dunst, a fantastic actress who doesn't get enough work. Virgin Suicides, you talked about, just it reeks of a movie where she's like, I might never get to make a movie again. So I'm going to do it. You know what I mean?
Going all out
like
the first
I'm
one,
just going to go for it, right? And it ends up, and that movie, like, that's one of those movies, like, if you're not moved by this movie in any way, like, check your heart, bro. Like, there's something wrong. But my third on her list is a movie that is, in some circles, reviled. I love The Bling Ring. That, to me, if I was ranking favorites as opposed to best, that might be number one. I'd love it. Okay. I have a really, really good time. Like, I want to rob. Let's do it. Like, it's great. Her, definitely lead actress's best performance in her career. Apologies to Harry Potter and all the TERFs out there, but this is her best performance.
Okay. Very fair. Like, I'm not going to push back against that.
And The Beguiled is my least. It's the lowest on my list. Still a good movie. Like a really good, solid 3.5 star out of 5 movie that I enjoy a great deal. She hasn't made a bad movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love all of these. The only film that I gave less than 4 stars is The Bling Ring. And I like that film. I need to go back and rewatch that movie. I will say, I think what spoiled it for me was Spring Breakers, because there's an energy to both of them that are similar. and Spring Breakers is
Also rules.
also. Yeah,
This is my
great. I love
niche,
it.
apparently. That's the exact type of movie I like.
So I do need to give The Bling Ring another go, but I still really liked it on the whole. And I agree with you about the performance. It's really great.
I didn't know Emma Watson had that in her. Like, I remember seeing it in the theater and being like, what?
It's so wildly different. So wildly different for her, right? Because what was
Totally.
that film she did like a few years before that? There was the one, it was like in 2012. I can't recall here off the cuff. I might have to look it up, but because she did a movie.
Oh,
like,
Perks of Being a Wallflower,
yes,
maybe?
Like Perks of Being a Wallflower feels like, based
feels
off of what we've seen
close.
from her with Harry Potter, it just feels like in spirit of who
Totally.
we know her to be. And I think she's fine in that film as well. And then, The Bling Ring is just so, it's a different side of her.
I mean, it's good, but it's no The Circle, obviously. That is
Yeah, of
her.
God. I totally forgot about that. That was such a disappointing movie.
Oh, it's rough.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Not good at all. But yeah, I mean, that is to say, like, I still really like The Bling Ring on the whole, but all of these other movies I'm really high on. Even On the Rocks, as I noted earlier, I think is really great. So, she's just one of those that I am always looking forward to, and I think that's why Priscilla was coming into the year one of my most anticipated of the year, and especially of this fall season. So
Yeah. And really briefly, Somewhere is actually like, and it's been negatively talked about in this way, but it's kind of a wonderful companion piece to Lost in Translation. It feels like it's dealing with some similar themes, but Stephen Dorff is in it in probably his best performance, which I know is not the highest gate to clear here. It's not like Stephen Dorff is an Oscar-winning actor. It's, the villain in Blade is not really, the guy. But Elle Fanning also in it in a wonderful performance. Michelle Monaghan, who is another one of those actresses that talk about who doesn't get enough work. Like, God, she's always so good and so genuine. And, you really feel Sophia reckoning with her relationship with her dad through a lot of these films, and I really enjoyed it. It's not one I've gone back to a bunch because it is a little bit slower. It's probably the slowest paced of her movies, but she does such a good job at interior lives without doing a bunch of narration, without doing an internal monologue. I think you really get inside of her characters' heads in a really interesting way.
I agree. I think a lot of it comes down to, yes, the writing. I do love the writing of her films, even if they do regurgitate some of the same themes, but a lot of it does come down to the performances. I mean, I think that's partially what I love so much about Lost in Translation. Bill Murray, I know it's not his most prominent performance, but it
might be his best.
That's where I was going to go. I think it's his best. It's at least one of my favorites, if not my favorite. And Scarlett Johansson is great in that film. And I just absolutely love its duality as it relates to monogamy and loneliness, and what the film is suggesting in terms of, this idea that we don't have to find any sort of outward savior for the disconnect in our lives, as much as we should embrace the emptiness we feel and connect with those who care enough to love you in that process. And that idea, I think, is extremely poignant, and especially comes through in those performances. And I love their dynamic throughout the film. And even though we joked earlier about how tonally it's very different in something like On the Rocks, but it's dealing with some of the same things, although it's less the loneliness thing. It's more so a woman coming to terms with her father, who he really is, his unfaithfulness. And you noted how that is a little meta for Coppola that comes through in some of these films. But it's the performances of that film. Again, it's Bill Murray, and again, he's not regurgitating Lost in Translation. That's more Bill Murray doing quintessential Bill Murray things.
Sure.
He's charming, but he also evokes that ambiguity that is necessary for the Rashida Jones character in that film, and I think she's absolutely fantastic and brings out, those central ideas in a really great way. And it's also very funny. That is a more lighthearted, funny movie, but I still think it carries a lot of heft. And and she in the hands of a different filmmaker, that would be more of a light, lesser movie. But
she is surprisingly very, very good at weaving comedy into even the most dramatic of her film. Like, you make a movie called The Virgin Suicides. And there are moments in that movie that are really, really funny. Really enjoyable. Yeah. Like, it's, obviously The Bling Ring has its moments of comedy.
Oh,
for
yes.
sure. Even The Beguiled, which is a very dour, serious, dark movie, has moments where we kind of lift that veil a little bit and we have to enjoy our time here, because I think she has an understanding that if you make a movie nothing but dour and nothing but sad and nothing but heaviness, that your audience it's gonna revolt. It's just going to be like, okay, I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to see Nicole Kidman cut someone open with a saw. That's what that's what I saw in the trailer. That's what I'm here for. So we got to get some levity in there. And I think she's kind of a master at weaving levity into very dramatic films, because other than maybe On the Rocks, she hasn't made an out and out comedy. I don't think she's interested in making an out and out comedy. She wants, I think she's really looking at, not to get too weird and deep about it, she's looking at life. She's looking at humanity, and humanity is dark and despairing and depressing, but it's also really funny. And I think she really gets that, and she gets that very difficult balance really down pat.
I agree, especially since all of her movies are funneled through the lens of womanhood in some way or another. And of course, that's going to compound the complexities in her movies all the more, whether it's something that is recent, as we see in The Bling Ring, or the 50s with Priscilla. I'm sure we'll get into that. Something modern with Lost in Translation, but then there's The Beguiled in the time period of that, and we go all the way to 1700s France with Marie Antoinette.
Right.
And so I love how she's able to capture something that is very accessible and relatable despite all of these various settings. Totally. And stylistically, I think she is able to be familiar and distinct simultaneously. I think you're able to see her thumbprint in all of these movies.
Oh, yeah.
The one that might be the hardest to define, at least for me, but I kind of love this about the film, is Marie Antoinette. That one, it almost felt like she was inspired by Scorsese in a lot of ways with that one.
A little bit.
But I love that it's more outlandish for her, but it's still masterful in its own right. I love its rockish nature, but it doesn't, like the energy and style of that tone, certainly it's not at the dismissal of the humanity of those characters either. Like all of that is there.
Yeah, totally. And it does feel, Marie Antoinette does feel financially like a little bit of a victory lap, right? Because it's right after Lost in Translation, and she's like, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Watch this. And I love when young directors do that, where they're like, you know what? I got nominated for an Academy Award. Nobody's going to say no to me. That's why I'm really interested to see what directors like the Daniels are going to do after Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, God knows that movie was big and brash. Like, what are they going to do now that they have a blank check to work with? Like, just whatever you want. And that's what Marie Antoinette definitely feels like. It allowed her to, recast Kirsten Dunst and her be the ultimate focus and have an empowered female story in a time where there wasn't a great deal of empowerment, and it still ends up working. And it also has like one of my favorite actresses in the world, Rose Byrne, in it. So that was really fun for me personally. Like, and Jason Schwartzman gets to play someone who you despise, which is great because I do. He's one of those, we all have those actors where like, even if they're not playing a bad guy or whatever, you're kind of like, I don't like you. And Jason Schwartzman is in that category for me. So it was like the perfect role for him. Like, I think she really understands where her actors work the best and are the most memorable. I can't think of a single performance in one of her movies where it feels like, oh, well, this is miscast. Like, this doesn't really work. Like, she really hits the nail on the head every single time.
I agree. I love the cast in all of her films that I've seen. Again, I haven't seen the one, but all of these others, I wholly agree with that. And the two that maybe come to mind to most is Bill Murray and, of course, Kirsten Dunst. I think what's so great about the casting of Kirsten Dunst and Marie Antoinette in particular, I love how she captures this beauty, but also the teenaged angst of that movie, I think comes through impeccably in her performance.
Totally.
And that's so fascinating, right? Because this is a movie that is almost like this teenage coming of age movie, but from the perspective of this rich, wealthy teenager. And who better to tell that story than Sofia Coppola, right? Who comes from royalty in her own right.
Yeah, true.
And how she's able to, I guess, depict all of that wealth and excess, but also the challenges of navigating politics and the complexities of that privilege. It's fascinating how she's able to tap into that. I don't know if anyone else could have made that movie.
No way.
She did.
No way.
Because she could understand it in some respect.
And I think she is, now that you bring that up, she is really interested in excess and the effects of that. Like, obviously, Marie Antoinette, but in Lost in Translation, like, he is a fading star who is cashing in. And what that means for his life, closer to the end than the beginning. And then you have, obviously, the Bling Ring, which is all about excess. It's all about, it's never enough and what that does to not only these characters, but us as a society. Because I remember when the Bling Ring story first came out in the news, it was like, isn't this funny? Isn't this wild that this happened? And then you watch this and you're like, oh, man, these kids they were already messed up, and they are messed up beyond belief by the time this is over. And it challenges you to try to feel bad for people that everything in you wants to go like, F these kids, man. Yeah. Like, they just do whatever they want, and they have no sense of empathy, and they don't care about anyone. But it makes you think about, like, look at the society we live in, and look where it's gone since then. Now we have, Instagram as a career. How far removed is that from the Bling Ring, And so it's weirdly, and I don't know that she meant to do this, but it is oddly prescient to watch that movie now with influencer culture being what it is.
Absolutely, because it's a film that wants to get into the debauchery of it all, but it also deconstructs where those choices come from and the reaction to the consequences that come. Totally. Or the perhaps avoidance of those consequences.
True. Yes.
But and then that does tap into a lot of what we see with social media culture. So I do agree with you there. And in terms of the excess that she gets into with some of these films, I do love how she's also able to understand the flip side of that coin, because that idea is juxtaposed with the Virgin Suicides and the Beguiled. That's all about repression and being contained in this prison of sorts, and how.
And I think Priscilla will be like that. And
Priscilla will probably very much fall in line with that as well. So she understands that, like both sides of that coin extremely well. And it's fascinating how, regardless of the perspective and where it comes from, she's able to find an ambiguity that's really great in her characters. And the performances are just immaculate in all of them, as you noted.
Yeah, and this is one of the two reasons I'm super looking forward to seeing Priscilla is that, you want to talk about being in a gilded cage. That's exactly what Priscilla Presley's life was like. So I'm very interested to see Sofia Coppola's version of that.
It's a little bit of both, right? Because it's Elvis, and with him comes a level of privilege and excess. Like, she had everything that she could have wanted material-wise, but emotionally, it's certainly going to be more like The Beguiled.
Yeah,
for the Suicides.
absolutely. And the other reason I'm super excited about it is, okay, so just this last year, we had a very low-key Elvis biopic, right?
Yeah.
Not low-key at all. Big and bombastic. Maybe the worst performance of Tom Hanks' career in that particular movie. A little rough. But I think purposefully, because I don't think Baz Luhrmann is interested in this, it leaves out the fact, really, like, it talks about how old Priscilla was when he courted her, but they just kind of brush past it. Oh, yeah, she was 14. Anyway, then they fell in love, and it was all nice. It was just Tom Hanks' character that was the problem. And this, this is going to look at it differently.
I think, to be fair to Baz, and, well, the director anyway, that's the problem with movies like that from a writing perspective. Biopics
too much.
That try to tell a grand story, you can't get into the nuances of those things because we got to get to the next Wikipedia bullet point. Which is
absolutely
hilarious. I will never forget this as long as I live. When we reviewed that on the show, all I did when we were talking about the script was I literally pulled up the Wikipedia page.
Oh, they did that?
If you read the subcategories on his life, that's exactly how the movie plays out.
Oh, no.
It's verbatim.
Yeah.
Verbatim.
Not surprising at all. Yeah.
So, he makes it, of course, bombastic and entertaining as Baz does, but the script really hinders the film from getting into
I feel like I could have written that script.
Exactly.
Like
Anyone could have.
Yeah.
Just wipe straight from Wikipedia. Sofia Coppola is obviously not going to do that for the reasons you're talking about. We're going to get into a lot of the haziness of that relationship.
Right. And maybe the inappropriateness of even the beginning of that relationship, which I think is an interesting story considering they stayed married for so many years and did truly care about one another. At some level. So I'm interested to see how she handles that. Because it would be very easy if this was a relationship that lasted 2 years and he was like wildly abusive and she ran away and escaped and that was the end. That's a very easy story to tell.
Yep.
But one where, it is abusive to be in your 20s and court someone who is in 8th grade. That's not great. Even for the time. Not great, guys.
Yeah.
And then, obviously there's stories of his emotional controlling and all that stuff. So you have to do that, but then also have to weave in at some level she cares about him. And like, how do you deal with that toxicity and that love at the same time? But I think Sofia Coppola is more than up for that challenge, and I'm really excited to see her tackle that.
I agree. And as an addendum to what we've already been talking about, the thing that people have been raving about this film, aside from her direction, is the performances.
Yeah.
That's all people talk about with this film. So it seems to be the quintessential Sofia Coppola movie.
Right. And I think it's important. Like, sometimes I think when we talk about, the performances were so great, we start seeing it as separate from the director. But there is a gift in a director who can either cast well or draw great performances from her actors. Yeah. And in this case, these are actors who are not wildly seasoned. So I got to think at least a portion of that is due to working with Sofia Coppola. She knows what she wants. She knows how to get it from her actors. It's not a coincidence that the great directors just always happen to have these amazing performances in their movies. It's like, no, because they're good directors. They direct those performances out of those great actors. There is shared credit there, and I cannot wait to see what she does with this story, especially so soon after a big, bombastic Elvis biopic from Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah.
Sponsored by Wikipedia.
Exactly. Without question. And I guess on that note, the only other, thought that I have regarding those two filmmakers and two films, I do think it's possible that while there maybe is some comparison to be made, I don't think we have to get into the trap of comparing the two.
They're going to be so different. They're going to be so different.
because of the Wikipedia sponsorship, Baz Luhrmann was not asking for a quiet, more tender, toxic, whatever Sophia's going to get into.
I do like the Love Me Tender reference, though. Very good, JD.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm here for.
No, I definitely think this movie is going to be so much more insular. I mean, I would bet it's mostly in one location, whereas Elvis was all over the country and live music performances.
Yeah.
Like, we'll probably just see him perform on television when she's at home and, finally has the freedom to live her life when he's not there, kind of taking up all the oxygen. It almost feels like this is going to be Sofia Coppola's horror movie. Like, although The Beguiled can be in that category as well.
The Beguiled is very much that in a lot of ways, and I do love the harrowing nature of that film. Just as a, the entertainment factor of that film, and also thematically, it's really great. But this will certainly be along those lines.
For sure.
And coming off something like On the Rocks, which was, not frivolous, but certainly more fun and
sure
and humorous, she's going back to the dramatic well, and I'm very excited for that.
Definitely.
Coming out in theaters this weekend, the great Sofia Coppola and Priscilla will, of course, have a podcast review of this. We'll have a written review as well. Do we have one already?
We already got one up because these movies come out months before any of us get to see them, JD.
Before you and I get to see them. Yeah. Everyone else gets to see them before
Thank you for setting me up one last time to yell into a microphone.
That's how we roll here. But anyway, at any rate, big fan of Sofia Coppola. Very much looking forward to that. So definitely go and check out the written review. The podcast review is on the way. And I think that'll do it for this week's show, unless there's something else on your mind, Dave, that you want to get into.
If you have privilege, be nice. Be aware of your privilege and say thank you every once in a while. Don't just be like, haha, I've seen it 3 times and no one else has seen it. Don't be a jerk.
I agree. Be nice, understand the privilege, and, again, let me know how you're able to do it, because I don't. It's hard with 2 kids.
Understand.
It's really hard with 2 kids, especially when one of them's a newborn. New-ish born.
You're screwed. You're done.
There's just no work. I did talk to Brandy, and I'm going to try to work it out to where I can go to one of them next year. That's my goal. I want to try to get to one, maybe New York.
I'm just saying, JD, I'm going to need some reviews from you for the website if you go to a...
I know. I want to try. Ideally, I'd like to go to Toronto because I can double dip in Toronto.
It's a hockey thing?
Yes.
Good God. Ugh.
Because the Hockey Hall of Fame is in Toronto.
Okay, all right.
So there's...
I thought you were going to tell me you're like a secret Maple Leafs fan or something.
No. I'm an open Detroit Red Wings fan, which means we don't like the Maple Leafs. But the Hockey Hall of Fame is in Toronto. I'd like to go see that. And then I can also do the festival. So that would be ideal.
So the Hockey Hall of Fame is in the town of like a real hockey team, unlike Detroit, is what you're saying.
Detroit is Hockey Town. Let's be...
No, it's Hockey Town, USA.
Hockey Town, USA. That is true. Toronto could be Hockey Town, Canada.
There you go.
But maybe New York. I feel like I have a lot of friends and peers that are in New York that I think would be fun to see. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's the great thing about taking these trips. You're going to find out if you really do have friends,
That's
or
true.
if they're I don't know, man.
Yeah,
it's all the way across town,
except Matt Neglia. But
there you go.
As long as he's there to greet me, I guess I can figure everything else
Good
out.
enough.
But that's the thing. Like, I have to, for me to go, I can't.
It's like a year in advance. Like,
I have to plan a year in advance. I have to get it approved by the boss.
You have to get on your knees and beg. You have to do favors.
Exactly.
What can I give you that you'll give me this? Yeah.
So, just if you want to make this a career, don't get married or have kids. That's the moral of the story.
Yeah, just be a single loser and go to movies for the rest of your life, and then look back on it when you're 80 and think about, did I make the right choice?
Yeah, who knows?
Debatable.
Yeah. At any rate, that'll do it for this week's show. We have a podcast review of Anatomy of a Fall. It is up right now. You can go and check that out. Coming soon, we'll have a podcast review of the Netflix film Fair Play. That was a really fun conversation. And as I noted, we'll get something up for Priscilla up very soon as well. So stay tuned for that. The latest Women in Session is up as well. Shadon Larkey, Erica Richards talked about this Taylor Swift person.
Oh, yeah. Travis Kelce's girlfriend, right?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, something to that effect.
Just kidding. I know who Taylor Swift
For the
is.
Swifties out there.
Don't come
Just
for
kidding.
me. Come for me at Darn That Dave on Twitter.
Yeah.
I would love to see that.
But at any rate, they talk about the Eras Tour film, and they talk about some of their favorite movies of the year. It was really great, so you can go and check that out. Of course, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, whatever's coming up next. I'm sure we'll be there as well.
Yeah.
Just search InSession Film. You'll find us on all those platforms. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Be sure to leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you're watching us on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, like the video, all that fun stuff. And I think that'll do it. Am I missing anything, Dave?
Just one thing. If we have any burgeoning writers out there, people interested in writing for InSessionFilm.com, you can send an email to that email address, InSessionFilm@gmail.com, with writing samples. We're always looking for more writers, especially women and people of color, because we want everyone to have a voice at InSessionFilm.com. So let us know. I'll help you through the process. I'm a good writer and a better editor, so I really want to help you become the best version of the writer you want to be. So if you're interested in writing, let us know. We're available.
Yeah, that's a great point. Always looking for new writers, and we'd definitely love to get up some new voices, so be sure to hit us up. That would be really fantastic. And thanks again, Dave, for being here. Really do appreciate you.
Sure. When you can't depend on Brendan, you know who's actually dependable.
Yeah.
The moment's notice, Dave's like, okay, I will fill in for Brendan because he should enjoy his honeymoon or whatever.
I know.
I'm here for you, buddy.
Yeah, really do appreciate that. And Dave will be back next week because Brendan will still somehow be in Aruba.
Good Lord.
I know. he's just been gone for so long.
Who is he again?
Yeah. We'll forget about him in another week or so.
That's right.
But no, we do hope he's having a great time. Thanks again, Dave, for being here. Thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see y'all next time on the InSession Film Podcast.